It's
I'm
Tuesday, September 30th, 2015, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today we're joined by one of our mentors, Krishna Madhuvarsu, Director of Product Strategy at Oracle. He's going to lead today's talk on product management at startups versus enterprises. And so for those of you joining us for the first time today, just let me briefly explain the format. The people joining us at the bottom of the screen are mentors and mentees within the current session of the Product Mentor Program. Product Mentor Program is all about pairing up great mentors and great mentees in the field of product management to help improve careers, improve skills in that field. If everyone could just wave hi for a quick second there. Hi, everyone. And so what we're going to quickly do is just do some quick introductions. I'm going to go left to right on my screen. So let's, and as you introduce yourself, remember to mention whether or not you're a mentor or a mentee. Let's start with Anthony.
Hey, I'm Anthony Nguyen. I'm one of the mentees, and I'm a product manager at Vitals, a healthcare transparency tech company.
Ian. And Ian's muted.
Ian Moulton here, product manager, working with Michael Enriquez. Good to be here. Missed what I was supposed to say, but glad to be here.
And Suresh.
Yeah, so I'm Krishna. I'm Director for Product Strategy with Oracle, and I'm a mentor. And the one quick heads up is I'm just enjoying my move from the Silicon Valley to the East Coast, and it's fun so far.
Excellent, excellent. And so for those of you joining us, you're probably joining either watching us on YouTube or if you're at theproductmentor.com/live. If you have questions, this is we try to get the questions into Krishna ASAP right away. And so just post your questions up. I'll be moderating them and post them to theproductmentor.com/live as the questions come in. I will pass them along, and we'll do our best to answer them. And again, I am Jeremy Horn, a.k.a. the Product Guy, and I'll be moderating today. But with all that said, let me hand it over to you, Krishna, for today's talk on product management at startups versus enterprises.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jeremy. So, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. I'm sure there are some folks who are joining us from all over the world, so thank you for taking the time. And I'm very excited to share these experiences on the whole startups and enterprises, how the product management really, the focus of the product management really changes across this wide spectrum in a way. So before I get into the meat of this topic, probably there are a couple of things that I want to just highlight as the context. So the worldwide, I think one of the biggest phenomena that we are looking at is there is an increased innovation, and at the same time the birth of the unicorns, right? That is what we keep hearing all around. And the once what is called or what is perceived as a sexiness with the IPO is no more, right? The money has become more of a commodity, and then you have the VCs, private equity folks who are able to sort of fund, and the money part, the finance part has become much more less strenuous at this point of time. And this structure has a very big impact, right, as we might see, because once you go on the IPO side, you are much more open to the public. All the products that you're looking at, each and every feature that you release, there is a bigger impact on the overall customers that you have, as well as your stock prices. So there is much more to take care versus whenever there is a startup, there are a couple of VCs or PE guys who are really backing you up. That has a whole different context on its own. The second important aspect that we need to consider is really the market consolidation, right? Especially in the technology area, we see each and every month there is a bigger acquisitions, mergers that are happening, especially when you see all the valley companies like Facebook, Google, Twitter, Microsoft, and whatnot. Every month something or the other M&A activity is happening. I mean, it's happening for a good reason, right? when you get to the scale of those companies, what is that next big thing that you want to do? It's not as simple as saying, hey, you know what, I'll just throw in a bunch of resources and then build something that is really cool. Right? It doesn't really happen that way. And so with these two contexts as really looking at the innovation that is really going sort of north, and then the whole of the market consolidation. The market consolidation is a very interesting piece, because when we really typically look at each and every industry in general, typically we have three major corporations that sort of dictate the industry in general as a whole. There could be several startups for sure, but I think the bargaining power of what those startups can do, how much they can influence, sort of diluted by the bigger guys out there. So with that, I think let's jump into the topic. So product management at startups and enterprises. a little bit about my sort of the whole experience of why I've gathered all these topics of startups and enterprises is, over the period of time, I worked with large corporations. What I mean is probably around 120,000 employees plus, versus some of the startups that I worked with are like 0 to 10 people. The maximum number of employees that I worked at a startup was 100 employees in that sense. And what that really gave me was, I've seen these sort of the two different ends of the spectrum on what a corporate environment looks like in terms of product management, and what a startup environment really looks like in terms of the product management. And fortunately, I also ran a social startup company for about a year in 2007, before the whole of the social networking and all these unicorns really came in. So that tremendously added to a lot of things that what I see today. And with that context, I think the place where I want to sort of navigate through for this session is, there are so many product managers who wants to be sort of, hey, you know what, I'm in the sort of product engineering, or I'm a software developer, I want to get into the product management. Or I'm at a startup, I'm an engineer or architect, I want to get into a product management job in enterprises. So the basic premise of the product management, even though is sort of same, which is to really look at some of the traits and skills. Hey, I mean, of course, we want product managers to really understand what is it all about, what am I building, who am I building for, what is the value proposition, what is that roadmap that I'm looking into, what are the release cycles, what are the escalations, and all these topics. But then what really happens is, as you move from startup to a bigger corporation, or bigger corporation to a startup, you tend to experience that, hey, you know what, there is one particular skill that I had to extremely depend on in a startup, when that particular skill probably is a separate function, or there is altogether a different person who is actually doing it. For example, we definitely, as product managers, we have to negotiate with multiple people, multiple departments, and some of the times these employees or these people that we are talking to may not really have the same knowledge that we have, right? But then once we talk about the startups, in a startup, by definition, there is good co-location. All your 5 to 10 employees are sitting in one nice cozy office, and every day you just talk to your CEO, CTO, CXOs, whatever we want to call them as. It's pretty easy for you to sort of talk to them and convince them to do something, versus when you are in a corporate environment, the negotiation skills are much more important for you to really say, hey, you know what, there are these 10 departments that I need to convince, there are this higher management that I need to really go and ask for the budget and whatnot. So these nuances are the only ones that really change, right? So the reason sort of why I bring up this topic is each and every trait or a skill is definitely applicable both in the startup or the enterprise, but then I really want to consider each and every skill. For example, as on a scale of 1 to 10, the lever is the one that really matters the most, right? Probably when you are there in the startup, the negotiation skills, probably if you are there at 3 or 4 on a scale of 10, you will still be very successful. But maybe in the corporations, you really need to sort of at least get close to 7 or 8 to be successful in the job, right? And then
I'm going to jump in right there. We've got a question from Anthony. Anthony, I'm going to go over to you.
Great, thanks. So forgive me for asking a pretty basic question.
Sure.
But to start, how are you defining a startup versus enterprise or corporation here in this discussion? Because from what I've seen in my experience, I've seen half a dozen different ways to define the two. None of which, some fit well in others. Some would fit well in some cases and don't fit as well in others. Like you have Uber, which has thousands of employees, or I've seen age in years versus number of employees versus pre-IPO or public versus what series of funding. What distinction is most meaningful to you here?
Yeah, sure, definitely. So when I'm talking about the startup, probably it is completely a new idea. It is probably there are a couple of founders who envisioned, hey, this is a great idea. We should really cater to this particular market, this particular set of users. And then simple things like, I'm sure, when Google was first founded, for sure, all that they probably had was 2 to 3 employees, right? A couple of co-founders and then probably 1 or 2 engineers. And then they started that mission on saying, hey, you know what, I really want to build something that solves the search problem, right? And the startup, the definition that I have in my mind is probably anywhere between 1 to 50 employees in a way. And of course, I think the definition of the Uber and probably some of these companies probably is in a way is to the other extreme of the startups, because by the way they are able to sort of raise the capital, by the way their evaluations really go up with 15, 20, $50 billion of evaluations just in a matter of a small time frame, it is pretty difficult for us to consider that they're a startup in a sense, right? By definition, they have now more capital, they have more resources that they can really throw it and then get a particular problem to be solved, versus think about, I'm just 10 people startup and then all that I have is $10 million cash in the bank, and then every month I'm burning, I have no idea whether the next quarter I'm going to get the money or not, right? Versus when I'm talking to the corporations, they're probably the IPO stage, they're already IPO, they're public companies, and they have thousands of customers. For example, the particular business unit that I work with at Oracle, we have 10,000 plus customers on day in and day out that we serve. I'm talking about just one business unit, right? So in that sense, what really becomes over there is a culture aspect to it for the enterprise. There is a subculture aspect to it because you are a separate business unit on it on your own. And now the resources are something that are relatively easy for you to get because you have the money, you have the customers, you have a complete cash flows that are coming in and day out. And we don't really worry about what is coming next quarter, or are we getting funded to the next quarter or not, are we closing our shop or not. That you are worry free, right? Versus on a startup, all that you are really doing is, hey, do I have my market fit analysis or not? Am I serving the right customer? Am I producing the right product or not? And am I pleasing my investors? Because probably there are a couple of investors who invested in a couple of $1 million, but still, from their point of view, they want full bang for the buck. But then I have no idea whether the next month I'm going to survive or not. That's the real differentiation between the way I'm looking at the startups and enterprises in that sense.
Okay, would it be fair then to say it's like a little bit of resource constraint on the startup side, as well as still attempting to validate the value proposition?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So some of these things, of course, as I go through, I think I have attempted to sort of answer these questions. For sure, I'm sure you'll get there.
Great. And so for those of you, anyone else who also has questions, keep them coming in and just post your questions to theproductmentor.com/live, and as they come in, we'll continue to pass them on. That said, back to you, Krishna.
Thank you, Jeremy. So, for the current discussion, what I really distilled was there are so many aspects of the startups and enterprises that we see day in and day out as sort of differentiators, but from the product management aspect of it, I felt these are the 8 topics that really create the biggest difference between the startups and enterprises. Just to go down this list, clearly there is a business model that we are looking at on whether we are looking at startup or the enterprise. The business models in general remain the same, and we need to look at the product roadmap. That is the one that really gives the customers and the internal development groups a sense of where we are going, what we want to do, and all that. And requirements is a very big piece, because the way we want to build the product, what we want to build, how we want to build, for whom do we want to build the product, all these things comes via requirements, and the sources of the requirements really matter a lot, right? And these things really vary a lot from the startups to enterprises in that sense. And the next big piece is innovation, quality aspect of it. Clearly, again, it is not to say that enterprise doesn't have some aspects or startups do not have some aspects. It is just that where we want to focus on when you are there in a startup versus enterprise really varies. I think that is where we are getting to here. The way we get the product feedback varies a lot in the enterprises as well as in the startups, because the access to customers, the access to users is not the same across the startups and enterprises. And the other big piece is, what is your company, what is your product vision, what is your company vision, and how do you want to sort of channel your products that you are building to support your company vision. That's a huge difference, right? Because when we're looking at the startup by definition, there is only one product that we're trying to understand whether it is a product or a service, versus when we're looking at the enterprises, there are probably tens or hundreds of products that are already there that are getting built, but then how do they sort of streamline into the company's vision of where they want to go? And the seventh aspect really is to say, what is that market fit that we are looking at, right? There is a bigger deal of the growing pains that startups go with, because we have no idea, even though we have the vision, we have the idea to really see that this is the right thing to do, but until we build the product and then we have the couple of customers and the users using it and then get the feedback and then multiple iterations, we have no idea that this is the right thing that we are doing. And finally, how are we really trying to grow as such, as the product portfolio and then the products and all that. So let's sort of get into each and every aspect of what we're looking at here. So one of the best thing that I use really to whenever we are launching new product or when we're really ideating about the new product is really getting to this aspect of what are these key aspects of our product to really make it successful in the marketplace, right? What are we building? What is the pain that we are trying to solve? And what are some of the channels that we are trying to establish so we can get this product out? And this sort of business model canvas gives us a certain good structure for us, whether we are working in the startups or we're working in the enterprises. The basic building blocks remains the same for us when we're looking at the product, right? To really get into the business model differences, in the startups, clearly there is a lot of self-discovery that is happening. Again, we have this idea. We know that there might be some customers who will be really willing to try this product. We don't exactly know what to build and how much to build. And what that really happens is there is this huge uncertainty as to say, what exactly is our business model? Are we talking about a freemium business model? Are we talking about the subscription business model? What is right for us? Are we talking about the licensing topic? Are we talking about the cloud operations? If it is cloud, then is it okay that we give 1 month free subscription, or is it 10-day free subscription? We have no idea, right? Even though there might be some established models out there in the market, but still, from your startup's context, what exactly is applicable until we get the product out and experiment, we have no idea. So that is where I say the business model in general goes through multiple changes in a way. And clearly, when we're writing the business plan as to say, hey, I mean, this is the product that we're trying to build, and then these are the aspects of the products that will make most sense to this particular group of users and whatnot. Most probably, we are pitching this to the investors, whether they're private equity firms or your venture capitalists, or maybe, who knows, it's your own family and friends who is investing in your startup in that sense, right? So the way we are trying to look at this whole business model is very much fluid in the startups. For example, in one of the company that I worked for, initially we said, hey, you know what, ours is a sort of Web 2.0 company, and all that we did was we have this nice JavaScripting framework, and we're able to build nice user interfaces on the top of it. And after a couple of months, we said, hey, you know what, probably the market is really looking for rich internet applications, because that is the buzzword where the whole internet is catching up during the 2006, 2007 time. And now we said, yeah, okay, fine, we are a RIA company. And after a couple of months again, we said, hey, you know what, probably RIA is not exactly the point, but we should probably move towards a sort of enterprise mashups as the theme for our company. And after almost 1.5 years, I guess, we sort of stuck to a theme that is enterprise analytics, right? So when you really look at this whole transformation of Web 2.0 to the RIA to sort of enterprise mashups to the enterprise analytics, there is so much of the business vision and then the business model in general that is changing. It becomes extremely challenging for the product managers to really keep up to the speed on what is going on, what is the investors looking at, what is my CEO and then the founders looking at, and then trying to adapt to all these single changes from end to end, right? Right from the product strategy, product design to requirements to really get it developed and then release cycle in that sense. And now, clearly moving on to the enterprises, the one good thing that happens to the enterprises is the fact that, I mean, they're established, they have a continuous revenue model, they have certain business model that they already know that is working for them, for sure, whether it is a licensing model or SaaS model and subscription model, it doesn't really matter. But there is something that you can already have a baseline on which you can take some decisions on, right? And the change in general has a huge impact, right? Unlike in startups where every 2 months you can afford to say that during the initial stages, hey, you know what, the company vision is changing, the business model is changing, this is the right way to do now. But whereas in the enterprises, the moment you want to change a particular business model from, for example, licensing model to cloud SaaS model, there is a huge impact. I mean, there are so many thousands of employees who are affected. There are so many departments that until now they are used to work in a certain model. There are certain processes, there are certain guidelines that they are getting used to, and now the complete shift of the licensing model to SaaS model has a huge impact on them. So in general, the change of the business models is a very slow process, and it has a huge impact on how we organize our products and how we convince our management to get the budget to do a certain thing. And clearly, I mean, the business plan that we are making is definitely, we're looking at, hey, saying, hey, these are the couple of products that we have. This is a great new idea that we think is very good for our company vision. It falls in alignment with our company vision, and these are the company stats that we have. These are the user stats, and then you go to your senior vice president or executive vice president for them to sort of really look at these financial models and say, yeah, okay, probably I think we should really start with a small POC, and then if it makes sense, then we'll go to the next step and whatnot, right? So clearly, when at a startup, when you're doing your business plan for the investors, the content that you might have in your business plan is definitely slightly different than if you are looking at a certain established models in your company, and then you are doing it for your own sort of management in that sense. So that's that with the business model differences between the startups and enterprises, and especially I think from the product manager's point of view, it is very important to really understand that the changes and the variability, because sometimes it will be extremely sort of difficult and excruciating and frustrating to that matter when your sort of CEO just calls up 10 o'clock in the night and says, hey, you know what, tomorrow I just talked to a customer at a dinner time, and then he needs this one, and so for the next 1 month, please get this particular feature done, right? So those are like definitely the possibilities that might happen in the startups versus in the enterprises. There is a defined path where you can really take up the business model and products with. Okay, the next important topic is definitely the roadmap, right? So no matter where you are, roadmap is such a basic part of our product manager's life, day in and day out, where all that we are really defining is, hey, you know what, how much of visibility do I have into the product that I'm building? Is it next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years of visibility? And how many releases am I really looking at? And what are the sort of themes or features and functions that are getting into each and every release in a way, right? But that has some major differences, right? Typically, when we're looking at startups, for the fact that I talked about, there is a certain amount of money in your bank balance, and you can only go certain route, because anything that you plan for the next 1 year is sometimes probably a waste of time, because you might not even survive for the next 1 year. All that you are typically looking at is, are we doing good for the next 3 months? Are we doing good for the next 6 months? And that's the maximum visibility that we have. So that puts a pressure on the product manager, because if you are really looking at only 3 to 6 months of time, and you clearly have a lot of resource constraints, because you might have maybe 3 or 4 development engineers that you have, and maybe 1 QA, and how much can you really accomplish with such a small team, right? But then the idea really is, okay, with this sort of roadmap that I'm trying to build on features and functions, and probably if I release it next 1 month, maybe there are a couple of beta customers that we're really looking at. So let me focus on just this one new thing that this beta customer needs, for example, right? And clearly, when it comes to sort of enterprises, we are typically looking at about 2 years down the line of the roadmap, right? Which is probably the first 1 year, you really have a fine granular details of features and functions, what you need to really get done in the next 1 year. And then for the next 1 year, for the second year, you might have things like, these are the high level themes that I really want to get to. And this is the general direction that we are going in terms of the roadmap is what your customers absolutely need, right? For example, some of the customers that I deal with in a day-to-day life, they are federal customers and they are sort of aviation customers and whatnot. They have been in the industry for several decades, and for them, all that they are really looking at is, hey, you know what? Is this company able to execute or not? Is this company able to sort of stick in for a long time or not, right? And some of the times when those guys are partnering with you as a technology vendor or technology partner, they really want to have sort of hand-in-hand roadmap planning, because some of the things that we are planning for the roadmap, they has a big impact on what our customer might be able to do in terms of his business. And moving on, this is a sort of fun picture that I always love, right? I've been seeing this from past 15 years, and each and every time I see, I think, I really appreciate whoever created this picture, right? As funny as it sounds, I'm sure, as product managers, we all know that making sure that we understand the requirements, we understand who we are building this product for is important, but at the same time, bringing this vision to all the different departments and the teams who are executing this product is all the more difficult, right? You might have certain vision, your CEO or the founder might have a certain vision, your investor might be thinking about a totally different vision as you have, and your engineering team might be thinking about their own set of challenges, your QA team might be having their own perspective. So it's really a point of saying, what is that from the requirement standpoint, I need to communicate clearly to each and every team member who is executing it, and both internally as well as externally becomes very, very important on the startups as well as the enterprise side, right? But then clearly there is a huge difference, right, on how we sort of gather the requirements and how people really view these requirements on startups and enterprises. So when we look at the startups, there is a huge part of the startups requirements gathering or that whole vision of the product that comes from the founders, right? And the whole point that founders had a particular idea in the mind, they looked at some of the requirements on what their customers needed or some of the users are needing. It becomes a really big part of the requirements in a startup, right? Typically, we might be looking at all these Basecamp or Jira, Confluence sort of tools to really gather the requirements, or maybe it doesn't really matter if it is a Word doc or PowerPoint, but still, all that we are trying to use these documents is, hey, these are the ideas, these are the sort of use cases that we want to execute, and we just roll it out to the engineering teams, we share it with them, look at the whiteboard, sort of look at all these nice use case diagrams, or look at the flow, and that's probably end of your requirement session in a way, right? You don't probably really have the issue of saying, hey, you know what, this is my requirements document. This needs to go through 10 levels of review before it goes to the engineering team, or there is no real formal way of really talking about it. In some of the extreme cases in my experience, all that we really do is just go to, we used Jira tool as much as possible, create the use cases, and just go onto the whiteboard, look at each and every use case, and then talk to engineering and QA on this is how, this is the next feature that we need to build and all the stuff. And that's with the startups, and moving on with the enterprises, right? The biggest thing that we're always looking from the bigger corporations point of view is definitely there is a bigger cash flow, there is certain products that have been more successful, and here now we are looking at, okay, what is this sort of expansion that I'm looking at? What is this? Typically we call it as the white space in the organization, where we could probably, if we build this particular product, maybe there is an opportunity for us to cross-sell or to upsell and those kind of things, right? And the fact that you have a established rapport, and the industry knows that you are a established vendor and all that, it is very easy for you to actually get the requirements from the industry experts. What I mean is, you are absolutely okay to get some of these experts, pay the fees whatever they want, and then get the user research done, get the industry research done, and then get this sort of feedback even before you venture into sort of requirements phase of a product, whether it really makes sense or not, right? And as much as we are building, whether we are maintaining an existing product or we are building a new product with an enterprise, there are definitely multiple bigger impact sources of the requirements, right? We always have these customers where we typically say 20% of the customers generate 80% of the revenues. That's a sort of general rule that we talk about, where we definitely have these 20% of the customers who are really talking about, hey, I need this feature A, this feature B, otherwise I'm not really going to renew your next licensing agreement or whatnot. And clearly, you are probably working with the partners, and partners have their own set of requirements. And when we're looking at the industry, industry is setting a sort of expectation, and we need to sort of move in that particular direction of the industry. For example, I mean, some of these trends clearly are, we are talking about the mobility, we are talking about the social, we are talking about the Internet of Things, right? But then we know that that is the industry trend, but then how does it apply to your particular product, your particular company, right? So we need to be able to really distill these industry trends into our requirements as well. And the last but not the least, the fact that the enterprises, by definition, they may have their own consulting services, or maybe they're working with a partner consulting services to really implement the product. Maybe they bring in their own aspect of, hey, you know what, this is very difficult for us to implement the product, so unless we have this feature ABC, we can't really implement in a nice manner, right? So these are the sort of set of nuances that we have from the requirements gathering point of view, where we definitely have set of these challenges on startups where, because of the limited availability of the resources, we have no idea where all these requirements of different resources are coming from. But whereas in the enterprises, we definitely have clearly defined set of sources in that sense. Moving on, there is a big impact on how the startups innovate, how the corporations innovate, and thus the quality of the product that we are delivering in general, right? So from the startup's point of view, it is always like the next big thing. It is a definitely a cool idea, a nice idea that nobody has ever solved, or maybe this startup is really trying to solve the same problem, but probably in a different way, right? In that sense, all that we are really talking about from the startup product management point of view is, hey, what is that next big idea, and then how do I decompose this idea into the product requirements and whatnot, right? And especially in a startup, what really happens is, because of the resource constraints and the definition of the product is definitely hinged on the product manager. You play multiple roles, right? There are at times that I was the sort of product strategist. I was the person who is designing the whole UI. I was the person who is designing the complete functionality with the flows of, whether a particular login screen or a logout screen or the functional screens, and then trying to hand it off with the development team. And then once it is developed, I was the QA who is actually doing the complete QA process to make sure that whether it fits the definition or not, right? In that sense, you can really see that at startups, product managers are typically expected to wear multiple hats for sure, because without that, it's very difficult for a product manager to be successful in that role. Clearly, because there is no set of defined responsibilities. Sometimes there are days when I had to learn quickly some JavaScripting code because the next day I have a demo to the customer that I had to do, and a particular certain developer was not available, right? So these kind of things are very common in the startup world. And from the enterprise point of view, clearly what really happens is, now that we have these products, there is this certain number of customers that we have already backed up. Market knows that this particular company is known for certain quality, certain set of products, and this is the direction that they are taking. Innovation definitely is there, but there is a lot of caution on each and every small thing that we are doing in an enterprise, because the moment we are talking about a particular new idea that disrupts everything, the biggest thing that we need to talk about is, yeah, okay, is this idea cannibalizing my own product in a way, right? Or is this idea is so different that it doesn't really align to our company goals, for example. And then you are typically focusing a lot on the stability of the product, how well is this product is getting integrated with the customer's products or the products within your organization, and there is a huge part of the quality, right? As for the famous quotes from Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, I think initial couple of years, all their mantra was to really hack the code, release, and then if it breaks, just fix it, right? So, and then we can really sort of see the transformation where once the IPO happened, once Facebook is now a public company, the sort of the mantra of, just fix it or hack it and fix it has come drastically down, because there are more number of investors who are looking at you. Now you are a public company, you are much more constrained in terms of what you can do in terms of the innovation and new things in general. Moving on, there is a big part to how we get the product feedback from the customers, right?
Actually, before you jump in fully to that part, we've got another question from Anthony. I'm going to throw over to you, Anthony.
So your presentation arguably makes a case that startups seem to be more risk tolerant, and they almost have to be, given the fact that they're in their self-discovery stage and the different points that you highlighted. And on the other end of the spectrum, established corporations are arguably mired in risk aversion given their obligation to shareholders, to the tradition, to the company value. And so one of the criticisms I've seen of these more established corporations is that this risk aversion, aversion to failures, even if calculated, often results in a lack of the kind of smart, small bets, small risks that remove a company's ability to test new hypotheses, develop market intelligence, react quickly, like innovation. Do you agree with that criticism? And if so, what can be done to avoid that and bring about a culture of innovation and risk-taking within a more risk-averse established company?
Sure. So my take on that one is, I think it's a lot to do with the culture, in a way. So I don't want to exactly take the talk about the exact companies, but then some of the famous companies that we typically talk about, I think, the consumer space, once you start with, hey, you know what, there is a greater space of risk tolerant, I don't really care. All that I really want to do is bring in a bunch of products, throw it in, see if it sticks or not, right? Google is definitely one great example of such a behavior where they just bring in a bunch of products, they release, and then user is their product, is what typically they say, right? Because there are all these free products, you are the one who is using these products. Either you use it more and more, which means there is a good use case for them to keep that, or people are not using, so just sort of put in the shelf space. But then coming back to this particular aspect of startups being more innovative and probably the enterprise being less innovative, the way I look at the enterprises is much more in terms of saying, how can we produce much more stable, predictable products to the market versus how can we produce much more innovative product, right? By the process of the stable and predictable products, we may be innovating a lot in enterprises too, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there is a lot of innovation there, right? So one of the aspects that we always try to look at is whenever we have these business units and the enterprises, typically most of the enterprises take few people from the business unit and say, hey, you know what, you are a sort of SWAT force, may call it as, right? You guys look at what's happening in the industry, you guys look at what we are doing in the business unit or the whole company wide, and then come out with this sort of totally new crazy ideas in general, and then see how the senior management really reacts, right? One of such things, I mean, we do a lot of those things. We have as many as 8 different products that we have, and then we also have a SWAT team. And all that it really does is they are probably all that they are looking at is the future. They don't really care about what current products that we have. They don't really care about what is the profitability, what is the cash flow, and all that they are looking at is with a single mind, what is that next thing that I can do to really take me to the sort of next innovation level, right? Some of these things really feed into our product roadmap for the different products, or sometimes there are cases where we launched completely new products based on these inputs, in that sense. So in that sense, corporations, as long as they are only single-minded to say, hey, you know what, I have this great product, I will reap the benefits as long as I can, they will soon perish, because this single product revenues may not really give you a long way, right? So all that you really need to do is continuously innovate on your own product line or different product line, bring in this variety of products to various industries, various use cases, and see which one sticks, and then probably retire the ones that doesn't work. Anyway.
Thank you.
Excellent. So as I said earlier, keep your questions coming in to theproductmentor.com/live, and right back to you, Krishna.
Thank you. Awesome. So one of the aspects that we're really interested to know is, okay, now we have these great products out there. How do I know that these products are being used in the right way? Who is using my product? Are end users who is using this product, are they using it in the right way? Is it what it is intended for, right? So all these questions are very much relevant from the point of the product feedback in the startups as well as the enterprises, but with few differences, right? Clearly, when we're looking at the sort of startups, the feedback from the customer, or I think one thing probably I want to distinguish really is whether we're in the startups or the enterprise. I think we need to really distinguish between these sort of, there is this customer that we are selling it to for sure, but there are a bunch of these users who might be using this product, right? Not necessarily that the user is the customer, at the same time vice versa, which is the customer that you sold to may not be the person who is actually using your product, right? So it's very typical that we sell it to a particular IT department. All that we sold it to is the IT director or IT VP, but then who are the actual users who is using it? Probably they are somewhere down below, some operation guys or DevOps guys and whatnot, right? But then from the product feedback point of view, the biggest nice thing as a product manager I always felt good about in startups is I always knew exactly what I am building, who I am building it for, and how is it being used for, right? In that sense, whenever I wanted to get some feedback on, I just used to call up the couple of users or a couple of beta users that I always interact with, and it was sort of very easy, just directly either meet them or a phone call or a WebEx, or you personally go meet them. There are huge number of insights that we get by directly talking to these users, right? And the biggest other impact area out there is in terms of the release cycle in a startups. Typically, it varies a lot, but it is very typical to say maybe there are a month of release cycle from the development point of view, but then the sales cycle could be little longer than 3-4 months or so. So what it really means is there are some of these beta customers or even alpha customers that you are working with when you are releasing it every month or every couple of weeks. But at the same time, you really want to get to that next level of saying, hey, you know what, I want someone at least to be partnered with in their development or to be paid with in terms of as the paid customer in that sense, right? So even this 3 months of a sales cycle is pretty good in a way where at the end of the 3 months you exactly know who the sales sold it to and what is the use cases that they sold this product for. So it's a pretty nice way of getting the feedback from the customers, the sales, and you know exactly what's happening out there, right? And clearly, one of the biggest things that you have is the agility, right? There are times when even now, and in some of the startups, the product release cycle is like there is no cycle really, right? We're just building in a particular feature, and then every other weekend are the times when we say, okay, this is in a stable state now. Let's release it. Let's get it over to the alpha customer, because when we start with, typically we only have one alpha customer who we are working with, for example, right? So in that sense, agility is all that you are really getting to, and the feedback is very quick in startups. Versus in the enterprises, clearly I think there is a huge delay in releasing the product as well as getting the feedback out of how this product fared in the sort of marketplace, right? Because when we really think about it, as the organization size increases, the number of salespeople increase. There are several hundreds of salespeople that we are working with, and there are these customer success managers. There might be some cloud success team and bunch of other layers, and sometimes it is very customary that even the senior management is actually safeguarding some of the very important customers on how they are performing, on how they are doing and all that. So it becomes very challenging for product managers to say, hey, you know what, it is not as easy as to say, just pick up send an email or pick up a phone call, pick up phone and call them up. But now you really need to plan on how you want to get this feedback, and not all customers are willing to provide that feedback, and you really want to choose which customers you want to get the feedback from, and there are different ways that you're really looking at in that sense. And clearly the scale is a very important aspect, right? As I mentioned before, if you are looking at the number of customers for your business unit is 10,000 plus, then you definitely can't get the feedback from all the 10,000 customers in a much more systematic way, right? The only way you can do is you can really pick up these industries, you can pick up some sampling rates, and then see what suits the best in that sense. And moving on to the next topic, which is the product vision, which is the most important topic we briefly touched on before. Most of the startups, I mean, definitely there are these founders, they have a vision, they have a direction that they really want to lead this product to, and the product vision that they are looking at could change, or rather it is expected to change, right? The more and more these founders are meeting the investors, the more and more they are looking at the users of alpha customers and beta customers. Maybe you're saying, hey, you know what, I really thought about going from north to south, but then probably, maybe now we should really go from the east to west, right? So the change in the vision of the product is something that is very inherent in the startups, and that is expected, right? So in that sense, as I said before, from the product managers, it becomes very important to really understand this dynamic and then say, okay, I want to be really vigilant on the changing needs of the product in that sense. And of course, the other challenge is to really get to the user acquisition, right? Because you are a startup, not many people are there to really trust you, and then which means you need to do something much, much better than what other established players in this field do as of today, right? And that becomes a bigger challenge on to say, okay, how do I acquire customers? What is the route of the customer acquisition? And is it the right customer that I acquired or not? Is there a way for me to fire the customer in some cases, right? And clearly from the enterprise point of view, the product vision is much more like filling in the white space on some of the products. How do I cross-sell? How do I upsell? How do I get into a different industry? How do I get into a different geography to really expand my product vision? And clearly, there is much more of the changes whenever we are talking about. There is much bigger changes that we need to do at the organizational level. I think that is what we are typically looking at between the startups and enterprises in general. Moving on. So now that we know there are some building blocks of the requirements that you have, there is this product that you are building in. There are a bunch of ways that you can build a product, but then how do we know that it is the exact market fit that you're looking at, right? How do we know that it exactly meets the customer needs, the user needs? Even if it meets the initial alpha and beta customers' needs, does it really scale up to really serve to different industries in that sense, right? So in general, there is a stat I think everybody believes in, where in terms of the startups, it really takes about 2 years for people to get a initial market fit in a way where you do a lot of self-discovery, and then finally it's about 1.5 to 2 years of time where you really say, okay, this is probably the right direction that I'm going with my product, and that is usually widely accepted. Or of course, it's a do or die situation. After 2 years, if we still haven't achieved market fit in general, then there is a bigger problem typically. And from the enterprise side, there is a sort of granted trust that you have. For a product manager, it makes it a sort of a little more easier in terms of executing. There is a market attention. For example, you can go to a big conference and then you say, hey, this is the company that I'm representing, and then this is the new product that we're bringing up. There are many more audiences that you can grab the attention from, versus when you're really a small startup. I think even getting to the field marketing or getting into these conferences itself is a big deal, because we don't have resources, we don't have the same money as enterprises. So each and everything that you're putting over there is very much sort of cost-centric with respect to startups. Moving on, it's really about the growth strategy, right? Startups wants to grow for sure, and then enterprise wants to grow for sure. But then there are these small nuances both sides typically look at, right? For the startups, it's really about what is the idea that you have, what is your team built up with, and how efficient is your team in executing what you always have envisioned in a way, right? And so in that sense, it really becomes either you are growing in a couple of years or you just die, right? And that is why we typically say 5 years is typically a time frame where we don't see 80% of the startups in general, because that is the time where you really understand the market, you have the right product of the expertise. Otherwise, you're just sort of going off the cliff. And from the enterprise's point of view, clearly, mergers and acquisitions is a key growth strategy that we've been lately looking at as an industry trend. Again, I mean, we can just look at all these companies that typically the Google, Facebook, Twitter, or the big enterprises like the Microsoft or Oracle or IBM, SAP, whoever we take, we see that each and every couple of months there are at least one or two companies that these enterprises are buying. That is for a clear reason, right? Again, as I said, one decision is to say, for the enterprises, I want to throw in more resources and then build, for example, a typical Uber-like functionality. But then the fact is, it's not just a question of throwing in a bunch of people, but then the whole point that comes, what is the culture, what is the founder's vision, what is the growth strategy for this company that we are buying in, right? So it really becomes a much bigger aspect as just to say that we want to build a product on our own. That is where the build or the buy becomes a much bigger decision on a day-to-day implementation side of it from the product manager's standpoint. I think the last but not the least, I think I want to briefly touch upon one thing, which is when I was referring to the white space, this is one example that I thought is helpful for everyone. So typically what we do is in the big enterprises, we say, hey, you know what, we have all these use cases that we are looking at, and then we want to get into, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 verticals in some time frame. So the idea really is the green means, for example, the use case one is pretty strong in the sort of engineering and construction space, whereas the use case one is absolutely not there for the rest of the industries, right? So this is what we typically talk about as a white space. And then the yellow is probably sort of, the strong, green is strong, yellow is sort of medium, and then red means weak presence of the products that we have, right? So all that we do at the end of 6 months or 1 year is keep looking at the industry data, keep looking at the products that we're building, and then see, hey, you know what? If we want to really fill up this white space, suppose say, I really want to get to use case 1 in, for example, industrial manufacturing, right? The fact that we don't have that product, is it that I really want to build myself, or is there a startup where they are really good at probably this use case 1 in the industrial manufacturing, and I want to sort of acquire them so I get this portfolio, right? It is a big win from corporations' point of view, because what it really sends the message to the customers is, hey, you know what? These guys get it. They understand the bigger needs of the corporations. They really want to support us to expand it to multiple industries. So all these industries can go to one vendor in that sense, right? So that is typically what we are looking at in terms of white space mechanism. And probably we have come to almost the end of this deck that I wanted to sort of share with you. So one final thought on the differences of product management in startups and enterprises is, do consider the skills that you have as sort of these dashboard indicators, right? And now look at the skill set that you have, look at what you are currently doing, whether you're in a startup or an enterprise. And now, if you are thinking of switching between enterprise to a startup or startup to enterprise, or maybe you want to be an entrepreneur on your own, you want to start a startup, which is absolutely great. But then the aspect really is, look at your skills and say, okay, if I'm doing a startup, these are probably the key aspects that I need to really look into, and then it really helps for you to visualize that, understand what are the implications of these changes that we need to do on the startups, on the enterprises, and navigate it in the right direction. And that's probably all I have at this point of time.
Very good. Thank you to our speaker, Krishna Madhuvarsu, Director of Product Strategy at Oracle, for today's discussion. Really insightful discussion on product management at startups versus enterprise, and a very detailed breakdown of a lot of the differences that I think many of us have experienced. As always, the presentation will be posted to our SlideShare channel shortly. And a big thank you from me, Jeremy Horn, the product guy, and everyone who joined us today, both in the room and outside. And also, don't forget, if you want to be a product mentor, like many other product mentors, like the one we have here tonight, please sign up at theproductmentor.com. Our session 4 starts on November 1st, and we're trying to get a lot more mentors in that program. We're still looking for probably about another 20 or 30 mentors. So please go and sign up right now. And I'll follow up with you very shortly. Also, if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, we have a free job board. It's free for everybody, and you just go to theproductjobs.com and join in. Hopefully you find a job, or hopefully you find a great product manager. And with all that said, thank you everyone for joining, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.